She didn't just humiliate me. She torched the last bridge between pretense and war. Let me paint the scene. We're at the annual Blackridge Gala. High glass ceilings, mahogany walls, linen draped in stock options. Every year, this event pulls in the firm's highest value clients. $50M minimum portfolios, board members who wear their pensions like scepters, wives dripping in hedge fund gilt, and diamonds the size of betrayal. And there I was, tucks pressed, cufflinks tight, quietly standing in the role I've mastered, the silent pillar beside the ambitious wife. Meredith had always been sharp. Ivy League, surgically ambitious, and skilled at slicing through glass ceilings with heels that clicked like warning bells. She'd spent the last 6 years building her image at Sable and Knox, modern wealth strategist, client growth guru, and, more recently, executive liaison to the regional board. That last one always made me smile. She wasn't lying. She liaised all right. The toast began with her boss, Stephen Ashcroft, the kind of man who uses synergy unironically and once said, "My watch costs more than a marriage license." He tapped the mic and toasted the firm's unprecedented growth and resilient leadership. Meredith stood next to him, champagne flute in one hand, pride ballooning in the other. Then she leaned into the mic. "Can I say something real quick?" she said, eyes glittering with the kind of boldness that usually precedes a lawsuit. Laughter. Encouragement. She raised her glass and scanned the room until her eyes landed on me. "This man right here," she pointed, grinning. "My husband, Raymond. You know, people always ask how I do it all. The truth is," she paused dramatically, "Ray's nothing but a paycheck to me. My boss is actually a man." Laughter erupted. Too loud, too long. Some startled, some forced. A few half-hearted gasps. But mostly, chuckles. Because this crowd doesn't just dine on shrimp towers and fiscal cliffs. They love a public power play. Stephen smirked like a villain who just found his final chess piece. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I drained my wine slowly, checked the time on the discreet Omega she'd never bothered to ask where I got. 9:46 p.m. That was the moment. The last variable in the equation snapped into place. The beauty of being underestimated is that people only look where you've told them to. Meredith always thought I was just a tax guy, some hybrid between a CPA and a husband-shaped accountant she could dismiss at fundraisers. She never once asked why my phone had encrypted call logs, why I had 4 NDAs in rotation, or why I flew to DC every second month for compliance workshops. Let her keep thinking that. Because when someone hands you the mic, and you've been quietly drafting the exit script for 2 years, you don't shout into it. You just press play. That night, while she smiled for pictures with Stephen's hand hovering too low on her back, I walked out the side door and made one call. Just one. No fury. No raised voice. Just a simple instruction. Final conditions met. Deploy the 5. I stepped into the night air, calm as a man who's not burning bridges, just removing road signs before the next person crashes into them. And hey, since you're already here, listening to this unravel in real time, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button. Over 90% of you are tuning in without it. And trust me, this rabbit hole only gets deeper. Plus, it's the one thing that actually helps this crew keep uncovering stories like this. Anyway, what they didn't see that night, what no one saw, was the folder already waiting at home. The one I'd started compiling 3 weeks prior. The anonymous tip had arrived quietly. Discrepancies in internal account routing, 2 mirrored expense reports, and an offshore beneficiary record linked to guess who? Stephen Ashcroft. With one secondary routing alias, M. Yates, Meredith's last name. And so, while she toasted her own arrogance in a room full of people who wouldn't remember her name by Monday, I was already preparing to make sure no one ever trusted it again. Because this story isn't about a divorce. It's about a data trail, a mistake, and a final sentence whispered into the ear of a man who thought he was above the rules. We know about the embezzlement. The thing about Meredith is, she never asked the right questions. She was a master at power plays, yes, but only on the stage. Her performance was tight, image curated, heels always sharp enough to draw blood. Yet somehow, she never asked what I actually did. Not once in 12 years of marriage did she look past the neat rows of financial reports I brought home. She thought I filed returns, balanced deductions, maybe helped some minor firms clean up after little mistakes. She never noticed the burner phones in the fireproof lockbox. Never questioned why our safe had dual authentication. Never asked why I had separate VPNs for travel, or why every time she brushed my coat on laundry day, there was a fresh non-disclosure tucked into the inner pocket with a signature date only hours old. To Meredith, I was Raymond Yates, harmless husband, tax guy, emotionally muted support system, reliable, passive, vanilla. In reality, I was 7 layers deep into corporate warfare. For 12 years, I worked as a contracted forensic risk analyst, the kind that gets hired through shell firms, sits behind mirrored glass in legal buildings, and gets paid more for silence than strategy. I didn't advertise what I did because if you do this right, no one's supposed to know you exist. My job was to dig through financials, find discrepancies before they went public, and send quiet flags up the chain so larger disasters never had the chance to explode. And that's why 3 weeks ago, when I got a request routed through my secure inbox with the subject, Irregular AR Routing Sable and Knox, flagged by anomaly scan, I knew something was coming. I just didn't know how personal it would become. The report had a red tag indicator, potential multi-layer beneficiary fraud, involving a senior executive's approval login. Attached were snippets of account mirrorings, timestamp inconsistencies, and a series of dummy invoices paid through a discretionary fund Meredith's department had access to. There it was, plain text. The first digital breadcrumb that didn't just point to a mismanaged account. It pointed to intent. Someone was laundering money through firm-registered client accounts using legacy code overrides. The name used for digital authentication? Stephen R. Ashcroft, with 3 co-approval flags. The most recent? M. Yates. I stared at the screen for a long time, not in disbelief. That had expired in me a long time ago. Meredith had been drifting closer to something risky for over a year. I saw the dinners, the urgent retreats, the sudden bursts of income she couldn't trace when she forgot to erase the stub from our joint banking alerts. She was subtle, but she wasn't careful. That file didn't make me angry. It made me alert. There's a moment every auditor learns to trust. The instant you see a name in a place it shouldn't be, and your brain switches from curiosity to containment. I read the file like I'd read 1,000 others. No panic, no emotion, just analysis. Then I moved. I created a new record in my offline drive, SK_Yates_audit 432. Backed it up twice. Encrypted it. Then I began pulling everything. Archived bank stubs. Legacy compliance override policies. IRS 1099K flow records. I used a forensic analysis tool built into my audit rig, one that auto-compares metadata timestamps with backend route logic. And when I ran a trace on beneficiary entity C, guess what showed up? A luxury real estate holding corporation in Delaware, purchased 2 months ago. Guess who signed the escrow? Not Meredith. Not Ashcroft. It was MYA Holdings LLC, short for Meredith Yates Ashcroft. No, she hadn't legally changed her name. Not yet. But the paperwork was filed. She was preparing an exit. Funny. I had 2. What she didn't know, and never cared to learn, was that I always operated 5 steps ahead. My job depended on anticipating panic before it started. So when I saw her name tied to that login, I didn't confront her. I didn't even mention it. Because she'd already written her confession. She just didn't know she signed it. Let her mock me in public. Let her toast to my irrelevance. I wasn't reacting. I was recording. I drafted a legal memo that night, with witness timestamp embedded, detailing the timeline of access misuse, internal privilege violations, and beneficiary fraud. I had enough to submit the initial flag to a federal compliance body. But I waited. Not out of mercy, out of strategy. Because now, with that toast, she gave me something better than evidence. Intent. Public. Documented. Broadcasted. She thought I was just a man with a checkbook. What she never read, never bothered to know, was the profile I'd spent 12 years building. The man who doesn't react with rage. He responds with a chain reaction no one can stop. There's something sacred about routine, especially when you know it's about to die. I left the gala without a scene. No dramatic confrontation, no shattered glasses or pointed fingers. I even smiled on the way out, nodded to one of the junior partners as if I were heading to the valet. He smiled back, oblivious. No one sees a storm when it wears a tux. My drive home was quiet. No music, just the hum of tires on pavement and the ticking of a dashboard clock moving toward a very specific hour, 11 p.m. That was the cutoff. Every audit protocol I'd ever followed had a standard rule: act before midnight, or the next day's logs overwrite the passive access records. I wasn't about to lose the cleanest trail I'd ever seen. At home, I walked past the kitchen where Meredith once liked to leave half-finished wine glasses and her laptop wide open, password taped underneath like some child trying to cheat a spelling test. Upstairs, the bedroom door was closed. Good. I wasn't interested in another monologue about how Stephen understands pressure better than you ever did. I turned right, into the study, the room no one ever used but me. A quiet oak and leather fortress with an old-school painting hung above the fireplace. Nothing flashy, just an unassuming seascape, until you lift the frame. Click. Behind it, recessed into the wall, was a biometric safe. Meredith knew it existed. She just never asked what was inside. Her mind was always on handbags, not handshakes. The scanner pinged green. The lock disengaged with a muted hiss. Inside was a single gray folder. No label on the outside. Just a matte, industrial texture, like the ones I used on private review cases. I pulled it out, set it on the desk, and opened it with the slow precision of a surgeon unsheathing a scalpel. Front page, Sable and Knox, audit match 432. I flipped through. The first document was a compliance anomaly report. Client 8443J, flagged for duplicate payment routing through non-standard IP authorization. Then came the logs, automated exports from the firm's internal auditing system. Line after line of time-stamped payment approvals. Two in particular stood out, processed within seconds of each other, both using identical authorization tokens, but routed to two separate beneficiary accounts. I cross-referenced the IP logs with the location metadata. Ashcroft's office. Twice. 6 weeks apart. Both between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. Both on nights when Meredith was working late. I ran the funnel routing. Followed the chain of beneficiary shell corporations, skipping through tax havens like Panama and Luxembourg until they circled right back into a Delaware-registered LLC, MY Holdings. The signature on the escrow agreement? M. Yates. That was the moment I felt it. Not anger, not betrayal. Precision. The sort of cold certainty that comes only when the math checks out. Meredith's fingerprints were all over a fraud scheme that had laundered over $3.4 million through legacy client accounts. And yet, the most damning piece wasn't in the numbers. It was in a photo, low-res, time-stamped from a security camera in the firm's weekend retreat house. Meredith sitting on a balcony, laptop open, glass of wine in hand. Ashcroft standing behind her, his ID badge visible on the table. And the screen? His login session. I printed it, slid it into the folder. This wasn't circumstantial anymore. This was conspiracy. I placed the folder in my briefcase, the black one with a hidden lock beneath the lining, and walked to the kitchen. Poured a glass of water. Looked at the digital clock on the microwave. 11:17 p.m. Time. I sat down at the island, pulled out my secure device, and typed a message to one of my off-book legal contacts. The kind who doesn't show up on payroll and only answers after 3 rings. Ready to submit. Confirm legal shield. 2 minutes later. Shield confirmed. Packet be prepared. You're under privilege. Perfect. I moved the digital copies to the encrypted drive, sealed the physical folder back in the briefcase, and returned the safe to its empty state. From the outside, nothing looked changed. But now, everything was. The embezzlement trail wasn't just mapped. It was indexed, time-stamped, and legally firewalled. I had jurisdiction triggers activated across 3 regions. If they tried to destroy evidence now, it would activate mandatory disclosures. They didn't know it yet, but their choices were already gone. Meredith thought I'd leave quietly. She forgot who designed the exits. The kind of war I wage doesn't start with shouting. It begins with silence. By 7:40 a.m., I was sitting in a private boardroom above a parking garage downtown. No signage, no receptionist, just a nondescript elevator that required a 6-digit code. Most people in that building didn't know the 5th floor existed, which is precisely why I booked it. Across from me sat 3 attorneys. No one wore suits. One wore a faded hoodie that said, "I bill by the hour, not by the mood." Another was barefoot, sipping a protein shake. But their credentials? Flawless. These weren't public-facing trial lawyers. These were compliance tacticians, sharpened in SEC fire and fluent in IRS subclauses that made Fortune 500s cry. "Morning, Ray," said the eldest, Thomas Wynn. 60-something, gray ponytail, and a reputation for turning whistleblower cases into corporate autopsies. I slid the folder across the table. Match 432. Confirm routing overlays. I've cross-referenced them with shell registration timestamps and IP access logs. They opened it and flipped through. No surprise in their eyes, just focus. "Ah," Wynn murmured. "She used her actual last name in one of the routing authorizations?" "Arrogance makes people lazy," I replied, "especially when they think everyone else is asleep." He kept reading, paused halfway through a page showing a beneficiary account in Luxembourg, Linked back to Ashcroft through an intermediation firm. You've been sitting on this how long? 3 weeks. Activated after a specific trigger. Last night, 9:46 p.m. He nodded slowly, then turned to the younger associate. Start the jurisdiction sweep. Delaware, Luxembourg, local counsel in Maryland. Use packet B. Set up firewall notification protocols. The woman nodded and opened her laptop. Within seconds, the digital dominoes began to tip, quietly. That's how these things work. You don't crash through the door. You build a pressure system so complex, so interconnected, that by the time they realize it's active, it's already too late to disarm. Wynn looked at me over the rim of his glasses. Does she know what she triggered? I didn't even blink. She'll know when it's no longer about her. Because that's the part she never understood. Meredith thought this was marital. Emotional. Some telenovela betrayal with passive-aggressive dinners and one-sided therapy. She didn't understand that what she did, the signatures, the approvals, the silence, wasn't just cheating. It was criminal exposure. She had looped herself into a financial scheme that spanned state lines and involved millions in undeclared revenue. And in the eyes of the feds, feelings don't matter. Only evidence. I stood to leave. Wynn raised one eyebrow. You sure you're ready to detonate this? I adjusted my coat. It's not a detonation. It's a controlled demolition. The structure's already cracked. I'm just letting gravity do its thing. Meanwhile, Meredith was eating breakfast in the firm's open-plan kitchen, laughing with her work family. She had a talent for performance, making even betrayal look bubbly. She giggled about the gala toast like it was the funniest thing she'd ever said. I mean, Ray won't even fight back. He's probably still brooding over the bill, she said, stabbing her avocado toast with the confidence of someone who thought consequences were for poor people. Ashcroft, standing beside her with a protein bar and a swollen ego, added, some people just don't understand how power works. You have it or you don't. They were right about one thing. I wouldn't fight, because fighting implies an equal arena. Gloves. Rules. A referee. This wasn't a fight. This was a forensic evisceration. Every joke she made in that office was like watching a condemned building laugh at the tremor beneath its feet. She couldn't see the shift, but it was already in motion. The calls were being logged. The account access alerts were pinging federal monitors. The compliance violation triggers, once passive, had now entered active review status. They wouldn't feel it yet. Not for another 24 hours. But it was coming. And by the time they realized the walls were moving, there wouldn't be any exits left. They say arrogance isn't just blindness. It's a choice to stare directly into the sun and call it a spotlight. 10:12 p.m. The firm's intranet server logs recorded a flag. A junior partner, Samir Patel, sharp kid, 3 years out of law school and still idealistic enough to care about protocol, was combing through old audit folders when he noticed something strange. Not a single smoking gun, not yet. Just a shadow. A handful of archive transactions from 2019 that were quietly reopened, reviewed, and left untouched. No change logs. No notes. No audit trail edits. That shouldn't have been possible. He ran a query through the internal flag system and saw it. 5 separate files, all linked to discretionary fund routing under Stephen Ashcroft's approval chain. What made it weirder? 3 of those files hadn't been accessed in over 2 years, until today. So Samir did what any terrified junior associate with half a conscience would do. He sent an encrypted alert to Stephen's secure inbox with a subject line that simply read, Access alert, 3Y archive logs, unscheduled. Stephen didn't even read the full thing. He saw the first paragraph, groaned, and rolled his eyes. He was half drunk in his office, nursing his second glass of scotch and watching an online video about executive posture language. Classic. Meredith was sitting on the couch in the corner, heels off, scrolling her phone with one hand and a chilled glass of Sauvignon in the other. Stephen read the line. Unusual routing metadata linked to 2019 discretionary expense files. He laughed. Jesus. It's probably just compliance running a system ping. IT's been jittery all week, he muttered. Meredith looked up. Is that something you should check? Stephen waved her off like someone swatting at a mosquito. Sweetheart, this place leaks red flags like it's a badge of honor. We've buried bigger things than that. Trust me, Raymond's not clever enough to stir anything. Meredith grinned. He barely said a word last night. I think I hit a nerve. Stephen didn't know it, but he wasn't drinking scotch. He was drinking the last ounces of plausible deniability. And Meredith? She was floating through delusion like it was her native language. At 10:37 p.m., she texted me. Meredith. Still mad about last night. winky face. The emoji. Always the emoji. I was sitting in my home office at the time, staring at two screens. One showing the live account trace route replication for the routed accounts. The other displaying the legal notification tree ready to deploy at 6 a.m. Everything was primed. I looked at her message and didn't hesitate. Me. Not mad. Just making adjustments. She left me on read. There was something delicious about that. The way she likely rolled her eyes, sipped her wine, and assumed she'd just won another round in a game I wasn't even playing. To her, that reply was silence. Indifference. Weakness. But in truth, it was the final calibration. I toggled the metadata envelope one last time, initiating the post-midnight sequence. At 6:30 a.m. sharp, 5 legal packets would be delivered, digitally and physically, to the Internal Revenue Service, Corporate Fraud Division, the SEC Regional Office, Whistleblower Compliance, a local circuit court with jurisdiction over white-collar investigations, Sable and Knox's legal oversight partner, the firm's insurance carrier for risk mitigation. Each one included sealed appendices, encrypted routing logs, and screenshots with multi-layered time-stamped metadata. The files didn't accuse. They demonstrated. And best of all, they didn't come from me. They came from a neutral third party, one of my audit contractors, a firm specializing in financial forensics, hired for routine analysis. The paper trail never led to Raymond Yates. It led to the truth. Meanwhile, Meredith lounged in silk pajamas at her boss's condo, thinking I was at home sulking, nursing my bruised ego. She had no idea I'd spent the last 3 hours locking her future in a sequence of protocols that couldn't be stopped, revoked, or negotiated. She thought the battle was over. She didn't realize the countdown had already begun, and by morning, the blast radius would speak for itself. The kettle clicked off at exactly 6:29 a.m. Not a second early, not a second late. Just like everything else I'd put in motion, I poured the hot water over a fresh press of Ethiopian roast. For minutes. That's all it takes to release the oil. Just like pressure. Just like leverage. You don't boil it, you let it steep. On the kitchen island, my laptop waited. The screen glowed soft blue in the pre-dawn light. No music. No distractions. Just the email window open, cursor blinking in the subject line I'd written 2 nights ago and left unsent. 2. Redacted oversight contact. Subject, known conflict of interest, embezzlement indicators enclosed. Attachment, audit_match 432_affidavit chain_seal.pdf. I reviewed it one last time. 12 pages. Chronological. Impartial tone. Legally witnessed. Digitally notarized. No opinions. Just data. It detailed the following. Documented access to privileged funds by a VP with no client-facing role. 2 overlapping logins on an executive device, used outside standard hours. Funds routed through shell beneficiaries with hidden ties to company officers. A time-stamped metadata chain proving account tampering on behalf of the VP. And finally, an attachment titled, Photo 433, Retreat Device Access Evidence. Meredith, on the balcony, laptop open, smiling. Behind her, Ashcroft, his badge visible, his hand on the back of her chair. Sometimes, the most damning evidence isn't forged documents or wire transfers. It's body language. I clicked send. 6:30 a.m. The trigger wasn't dramatic. No alarm bells. No explosions. Just a quiet whoosh as the email left my outbox and entered a legal universe where delays didn't exist. Only consequences. I walked to the window and watched the sunrise kiss the top of our neighbor's porch swing. Peaceful. Predictable. Unaware of what was unfolding behind office walls and encrypted servers across state lines. Then I picked up my phone. Me contact L. Deployment confirmed. 5 will arrive. Use envelope A. 3 dots. Then. Understood. All channels primed. I put the phone down and sipped my coffee. In the background, I heard Meredith's voice drift down from the bedroom. She was on speaker with one of her assistants, laughing about something. Probably the new client she'd wined and dined into a queue for commitment. And I told him, honey, we are the portfolio, she said, giggling. Raymond's probably still in bed with his spreadsheets. She had no idea I was listening. She had no idea the bed was made. She had no idea I wasn't part of the next chapter. At 6:44 a.m., she walked into the kitchen wearing a pale blue silk blouse and a pencil skirt too polished for someone who claimed her firm was casual Fridays all week now. She didn't even look at me, just breezed past, grabbed her travel mug, and chirped, off to save the economy. You need anything from the market? I smiled faintly. No, I've got everything I need. She didn't catch it. She was already halfway to her car, typing something flirty into her phone, probably Ashcroft. Probably another inside joke at my expense. And I returned to my seat, refreshed the browser, and watched as the recipient confirmed open status on the email. Green checkmark. Then another. Regulatory compliance. Federal Fraud Division. Internal Affairs. Third-Party Insurance Council. SEC. All 5. Received. Engaged. At 7:02 a.m., my contractor's system logged the handoff trigger as active. By 8 a.m., 5 attorneys would walk into 5 different offices across 2 cities. They wouldn't shout. They wouldn't threaten. They would present. And Ashcroft. He'd recognize the documents immediately. He'd see the forensic data and know what it meant. The kind of report that doesn't ask if you're guilty. It tells you how long you have left before the options evaporate. At 7:05 a.m., I finished my coffee. Calm. Steady. Unmoved. Meredith still had 45 minutes left of peace. The last 45 she'd ever spent thinking she'd won. 9 a.m. sharp. No one expects the storm to wear loafers and carry leather folders. The reception area of Sable and Knox buzzed with the usual mid-morning churn. Interns running coffee, VPs pacing while half-shouting into Bluetooth headsets, and the scent of expensive toner giving everything that sterile, artificial calm. Until the elevator dinged. 5 of them stepped out. They didn't look like government. No badges flashed. No stern expressions. Just 5 professionally dressed individuals who walked with such unified intent that people instinctively moved aside. The receptionist, Jessica, early 20s, too new to smell blood, stood and stammered, "Can I help you?" One of the attorneys, the shortest among them, reached into his briefcase and placed a thick envelope onto the counter with an audible thud. Then, with absolute clarity, "We have an executed court order and federally certified subpoena for immediate presentation. Where's Meredith Yates?" Jessica blinked. She's in a client review with Mr. Ashcroft." The attorney didn't wait. He simply turned and walked past the security gates, the others flanking him like chess pieces already in motion. The building's VP of facilities noticed and hustled behind them, asking, "Excuse me, do you have authorization?" The tall woman near the back turned, held up a separate sheet with a seal. "Signed this morning. U.S. District Court. Enforcement authorization granted. Step aside, or you become obstruction." He stepped aside. Upstairs, Meredith was mid-pitch in conference room B, her voice loud and confident, walking a nervous investor couple through dynamic options layering in estate portfolios. Ashcroft sat at the head of the table, nodding occasionally, sipping his matcha like he hadn't laundered 7 figures through client accounts. The double doors opened. The 5 attorneys entered without asking. The investor couple went pale. Meredith froze mid-sentence. Ashcroft stood, indignant. "This is a private client meeting." The lead attorney placed a thick folder on the table with surgical precision. On the cover, encrypted evidence submission, embezzlement report 432C. Beneath it, cross-linked beneficiary payments, Sable and Knox client fraud violation. Ashcroft reached for the folder like it might bite. He opened it, saw the first page, stopped. His eyes scanned the words slowly. Metadata timestamps, IP access logs, account routing schemes. His name, Meredith's initials, dates, amounts, photographic evidence. He didn't speak. His face turned to ash. "Mr. Ashcroft," said the lawyer quietly, "you are named in a federal compliance fraud report involving embezzlement through client assets and misrepresented beneficiary entities." Meredith stammered. "What is this? What is happening?" Another attorney handed her a sealed envelope. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, for printed pages of subpoena language, client account audit trails, and a single grainy image. Her, on that balcony, with Ashcroft's login visible on the screen. Ashcroft finally spoke, but only one word. "Raymond." One of the attorneys leaned in and said it softly, directly into his ear. "We know, and so does the IRS." Ashcroft sat down. No defense, no rage, just the sudden vacuum of power being sucked from the room like an airlock opening in space. The client stood and left without a word. Meredith followed them with her eyes, dumbfounded. She turned back to the lawyers. This can't be real. You can't just barge in and..." The attorney nodded toward the wall. "Security footage already reviewed. Your login tokens match the flagged entries. Beneficiary payments were funneled through an entity registered under MYA Holdings. Escrow signature, M. Yates." "But I didn't." She tried to laugh, desperate. That's just a name. It could be anyone. The second envelope landed in front of her. Inside, a bank statement with her signature, verified by digital timestamp and IP login, sent from their home network. Silence. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, staff had started to gather. Not because anyone made a scene, but because of how quiet it had become inside. And when silence happens at Sable and Knox, people notice. Ashcroft put his head in his hands. Meredith didn't move. The lawyers simply stood, waiting, not pressing, not negotiating, because the wave had already hit. And now, they were just watching what floated and what drowned. The walls weren't padded, but they may as well have been. Sable and Knox had 3 internal legal rooms, soundproofed, frosted glass, just far enough from the executive suite to be isolating. Interrogation rooms in everything but name. Meredith sat in the second one. Alone. No watch. No phone. Just the slow click of the HVAC vent and the tap of her nails against the cheap conference table as she waited for someone, anyone, to tell her what the hell was happening. Across the hall, Ashcroft sat in a nearly identical room, holding a glass of water he hadn't touched. The attorneys didn't split them out of courtesy. They did it because panic spreads faster in isolation. First, they hit Ashcroft. 2 attorneys entered, calm, clipped, expressionless. One of them carried a leather portfolio. Ashcroft stood and tried to summon his usual alpha posture. "I want my legal team." "You're free to call them," said the older lawyer. "Though I suspect they've already received the duplicate packet from our insurance division. We send it with time-stamped evidence and a pre-brief of liability. We expect they'll advise immediate cooperation." Ashcroft froze. He knew what that meant. They flipped first. That's the danger of playing games with institutions that insure you. The moment they sense your actions threaten their bottom line, they stop defending you and start preserving themselves. He sat. "What do you want?" he asked, voice low. The younger lawyer laid out a simple set of papers. What you approved, when, and what you knew about the secondary routing keys. They turned to a page marked with 2 highlighter tabs. Beneficiary routing. Explain why discretionary funds tagged for charitable partnerships were rerouted to MYA Holdings LLC, registered to a Delaware shell. Escrow signed by Meredith Yates. Ashcroft blinked. "I didn't sign." "We didn't say you signed it. But you authorized the override keys. On your executive credentials. Twice. Here and here." He pointed. "With attached metadata showing timestamps from your office. IP matched." Unmasked. Ashcroft's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Then came the kill stroke. The older attorney dropped a grainy black and white photo on the table. Taken at the Ashcroft cabin retreat 3 months ago. Sunday, 11:43 p.m. In the photo, Meredith, on the deck, glass of wine in one hand, laptop open. Her smile lazy. Smug. Beside her, Ashcroft's ID badge, lanyard visible. On screen, a login session in his name. Active. Showing the routing access interface. Ashcroft's voice dropped to a whisper. She said she was just checking her email. The attorney leaned back. And now she's checking into a compliance investigation. Meanwhile, in the other room, Meredith was unraveling faster. She'd been holding the same glass of water for 12 minutes. It had started to tremble. The lawyer opposite her was young, methodical, and completely unaffected by Meredith's emotional pivot strategy. "I didn't even know Stephen used my name," she said. Hands up, palms open. "That's got to be illegal, right? I mean, I don't control how he logs in." The attorney slid a page forward. "You logged in from the same IP address, using a subkey approval that required 2-factor authentication tied to your work email. Not his. Yours." Meredith blinked. "That doesn't mean anything. Maybe someone spoofed my access." He slid a second page forward. "Here's the keychain log from the firm laptop issued to you. Timestamped to the minute. Geo-verified. Matched against the system registry showing access to discretionary funds." She tried again. That's not definitive. I wasn't the only one with that laptop. Stephen and I." "You shared devices?" "I mean, not like he borrowed it once." He raised an eyebrow. She shifted in her chair. "You're on a private balcony, at a private retreat, using your company laptop, with an active login tied to an embezzlement pattern that's now under federal review." Then came the final blow. He reached into his folder and placed the photo down. "Is this you?" She stared. Pale. "Not. And is this your laptop?" "Not. And that's Mr. Ashcroft's ID badge next to it?" "Ah, yes, but, and this login session, whose name is that?" Her lips barely moved. "Stevens." He leaned forward, his tone calm. "Not angry. Just curious. Why were you logged into your superior's account? on your laptop, using privileged access to authorize payments into a holding company that lists you as escrow signer. Silence. Her nails dug into the paper cup. Her first real fear had arrived, not just of being caught, but of not being believed. The escape routes were gone. The spinning was over. They hadn't come looking for guilt. They'd brought it with them, cataloged, time-stamped, cross-referenced, and ready for court. She was no longer a strategist. She was an exhibit. It came wrapped in polite paper. An envelope delivered by private courier, not a knock from a marshal. No handcuffs, no courtroom drama, just a quiet, clinical takedown authored by someone who understood how to kill a future with paperwork. Meredith was home when it arrived. She'd been sent home earlier that morning. Not fired. Not yet. Just temporarily relieved of duties pending the outcome of an internal and federal compliance investigation. That's how the firm phrased it. Ashcroft had been placed on administrative leave. HR had said something about preserving the integrity of the review, but the looks on everyone's faces said it more clearly. You're radioactive now. She'd stormed out of the building wrapped in a scarf she didn't need, sunglasses too large for a cloudy day. A woman performing normalcy while her image smoldered behind her like a corporate PR dumpster fire. At 6:12 p.m., the courier arrived at her door. No expression, no sympathy, just a clipboard, a signature request, and a slim, legal-grade envelope labeled Yates versus Yates, filing notice, dissolution and enforcement. She tore it open in the kitchen, hands sticky with wine sweat, breath shallow. Inside, a letterhead bearing the seal of a boutique family law firm she didn't recognize, likely one of Raymond's many quiet alliances. She read the first sentence. This letter serves as notice of legal proceedings initiated by your spouse, Raymond Yates, for dissolution of marriage under California Code, Article 4, Section 2310. Her vision blurred. She kept reading, slower now. As detailed in the attached filing, enforcement of the prenuptial agreement executed on October 14, 2011, has been triggered via Clause 7, reputational harm via professional misconduct. She flipped to the clause summary. It was real. The clause was real. She remembered brushing it off years ago during some wine-drenched review session with a half-interested lawyer who said, "This is boilerplate. Won't matter unless someone goes nuclear." Well, the clause was simple, brutal, clinical. Any reputational harm caused by either party through verified public or professional misconduct would nullify future claims to shared real estate acquired during the marriage, 401k or retirement matching assets, any profits earned from spousal business affiliations, passive or active. In plain English, she lost the house, the retirement match, and the 3 investment properties Raymond had casually folded her into over the years. Just like that. She tried to catch her breath. Her knees buckled, but she stayed standing, fingers white-knuckled on the marble counter as she flipped to the last page. There it was. His signature. Raymond J. Yates. Filed and notarized. 3 days before the gala. Not the day after. Not a revenge filing. Not an angry reaction. This wasn't emotional. It was premeditated. He hadn't been pushed to do this. He'd waited. He'd planned. She whispered aloud, as if saying it would undo it. No, he wouldn't, he didn't. But he did. She checked the timestamps on the documents. He'd filed everything before she ever made the joke. Before the gala. Before she held that mic like a dagger and carved his name into a punchline. It wasn't the insult that triggered him. It was just the final box he needed checked. She sat on the floor, envelope clutched to her chest like it could warm her. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from an unknown number. Likely press. Or maybe a friend pretending not to enjoy the spectacle. Or maybe Ashcroft, spiraling toward some legal purgatory of his own. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because right there, in her own kitchen, with the ink still fresh, the truth rang louder than anything she'd said into that mic. He was never the fool. He was the fuse. 3 weeks is an eternity when your name is a warning label. By day 5, Meredith's email had been shut down. Her name scrubbed from Sable and Knox's staff page. By day 11, the firm's statement went public. Pending further review, all personnel connected to the flagged accounts have been removed from operational duties. They didn't use names. They didn't need to. The internet did it for them. By day 14, Stephen Ashcroft was indicted. Wire fraud, obstruction, misuse of fiduciary access. He turned himself in. No perp walk. Just a closed-door meeting with federal agents, followed by a resignation letter that used the word unfortunate 6 times in 3 paragraphs. Meredith's turn came slower. She hadn't been formally charged, Not yet. But she was named. Not publicly, but in the internal case brief leaked to the firm's insurance counsel. And when you're named in a federal inquiry, your world doesn't explode. It just shrinks. Emails go unanswered. Recruiters forget you exist. Friends stop texting, unsure if your number's been tapped. Your apartment echoes louder at night. And Raymond? He didn't post a thing. Not a tweet. Not a photo. Not a single passive-aggressive quote about karma or snakes or strength. He simply moved on. Quietly. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, he attended a private panel at a boutique conference on corporate ethics and forensic auditing. No cameras. No badge scans. Just 30 people in a closed room, all of whom had seen what happens when an internal audit turns into a controlled implosion. He sat near the back, listened, nodded, answered one question about metadata layering in legacy systems. Took no credit for what everyone there suspected he'd done. Across town, Meredith sat in her apartment, lights dim, laptop open to an article just published by Compliance Quarterly. Title, Lessons from Sable and Knox. How Internal Blind Spots Crushed a $50 million Firm's Leadership. The article was cold, factual, built from leaked documents and redacted interviews. It outlined the structure of the fraud, the accounts, the dummy beneficiaries, the failure of executive oversight. But the ending? That's what killed her. The final paragraph of the article included a single redacted statement from the case file, now public under FOIA request. Instigated by external whistleblower. Identity protected. She stared at it, pulse racing. Then she saw the photo. Not a mugshot. Not a courtroom sketch. A conference photo. Clean, professional, almost too crisp. Likely taken during the ethics panel. There he was, Raymond, standing beside two attorneys. Calm, relaxed, wearing that navy suit she once said made him look too quiet. He was smiling, not gloating, not smug, just free. And in that moment, Meredith finally understood there would be no rebuttal. No public war. No interview where she could twist the narrative and cry about betrayal. Because he had never fought her publicly. He'd erased her, methodically, lawfully, irrevocably. Her hands trembled. She opened her messages. Typed his name. Paused. What would she even say? Why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you scream? But deep down, she already knew the answer. He didn't scream. Because he didn't have to. So she sat there, staring at his photo. And the scream? It never made it past her throat.